Mitzvah of Kiddush on Friday night, part 1. What we say and why we say it. So we're all familiar with the Kiddush we say Friday night. It consists of 3 parts. The first part is Vayer Vayivoker Yom HaShishi. Second part is Bori Pri HaGofen. And the third part is the long paragraph, the bracha, that starts with Baruch Atah Hashem and ends with Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat. We'll label each one of these. The first paragraph we'll call 1, the bracha on wine we'll call 2, and the final bracha we'll call 3. Let's just look at each one for a moment. So the first paragraph should be a little familiar from Bereshit. It's actually mostly from Perek Bet of Bereshit, and describes the fact that Hashem completed the world and rested on the 7th day. This seems to be more of an introduction to Kiddush. We'll talk about this more in a few moments. Moving down to the second part, which is the Borei Pri HaGofen. This is really the first bracha that we say for Kiddush, and we all know this is an important part, drinking the wine, having a cup of wine, and saying a bracha on it. And then the third part is also a bracha, and this bracha is a bracha on the day of Shabbat, describing the beauty of the day, the holiness of the day, and we even end with Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat, that Hashem sanctified the day of Shabbos. An interesting question to think about is that these last 2 parts, parts 2 and 3, one is the Borei Pri HaGofen, and one is saying Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat. So the question is, which one of these is really the main part of Kiddush? Is it the Borei Pri HaGofen and the drinking of the wine? Is that what Kiddush is really mainly about, to have wine at our meal? Or is it about the final paragraph, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat, and that whole paragraph? Is that the main part of Kiddush? So the answer can be found very clearly in the Rambam, based on the Gemara. And the Rambam says in Hilchot Shabbat the following. He says, Mitzvah aseh min HaTorah. There is a positive mitzvah from the Torah, a mitzvah that requires action. L'kadesh Yom HaShabbat b'dvarim, to sanctify the day of Shabbos with words, b'dvarim. Meaning the mitzvah really is to describe and to use your words to say how holy Shabbos is. And he quotes the source, Shenamar, as it says in the pasuk, Zachor Yom HaShabbat leKadsho. And then he continues and he says, Klomar, meaning to say, Zachreu Zechirat Shavach v'Kiddush, that you should remember it by talking about the praise of Shabbat and the holiness of Shabbat. So clearly we see from the Rambam that the main part of Kiddush is the saying of the words, is the final paragraph where you describe the Kedushat Hayom, the holiness of the day of Shabbat. So where does the idea of using a cup of wine come from? So the Rambam says later on, Midivrei Sofrim, from the scribes, from the Rabbanim, from the Chachamim, L'kadesh al hayayin. The Chachamim added an element that Kiddush should be said over a cup of wine, that the words should be dignified by using a cup of wine. So now we understand, again, the main part of Kiddush is part 3, and it is accompanied with wine, and therefore we have to say the Borei Pri HaGofen. Okay, let's take a look again at the 3 parts of Kiddush. So the question I want to talk about is, what about the first paragraph? Where does that come from? So the Rambam addresses this as well, and he says, Uminag pashut b'chol Yisrael. The minhag became widespread in Klal Yisrael. L'krot batchila parshat Vayechulu, to first say the parsha of Vayechulu, v'achar kach mevarech al hayayin, and then you say the bracha on wine, v'achar kach mekadesh. So really it's a minhag to say that first paragraph, which is from Bereshit Perek Bet. It serves as an introduction to Kiddush. But let's take a look for a moment. We all know that Kiddush doesn't start with Vayechulu. Kiddush really starts with Vayer Vayivoker Yom HaShishi, or some people start with Yom HaShishi. So if you look at Bereshit, we see that Perek Bet begins with the word Vayechulu, and we take the last 2 or perhaps 6 words from the previous Perek, and we link it to Kiddush, Yom HaShishi. Some people say Vayer Vayivoker. Why do we do this? Why do we say Vayer Vayivoker Yom HaShishi in our Kiddush? So that's the question we'll talk about. And the answer lies in a very interesting fact. If you look at the first letters, if we start with Yom HaShishi, so the first letter is of course Yud, and then Hey, and then the Vav Vayechulu, and then the Hey from Hashemayim. And of course, what does that spell out? It spells out Hashem's name. So that's a reason given for starting with Yom HaShishi. Some people start with the Vayer Vayivoker just so that Yom HaShishi doesn't stand all by itself, but that it makes some sense. Vayer Vayivoker Yom HaShishi was the evening and the morning, the 6th day.